Hello, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the final segment of our Hospital Community Benefit webinar series. I am Patricia Terstenyak, and I serve as the Director of Community Health at the Center for Health Affairs. For those of you joining us for the first time, this is the third episode in our three-part webinar series on hospital community benefits in Northeast Ohio. During our first episode, the center's own Lisa Anderson and Bob Kalichowski provided an extensive overview of what community benefits are, the importance of community benefits, and the impact community benefits have as a whole on our region. In our second episode of the series, the center's CEO and president, Brian Lane, was joined by representatives from Metro Health's Institute for Health, St. Vincent Charity Medical Center, the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland, and Ashtabula County Medical Center to discuss some of the specific programs that our region's hospitals provide around community health improvement and community building. Those episodes are available to watch anytime on our Bright Talk channel for those who did not have a chance to view them when they aired. Bright Talk is a content marketing platform which allows us to share research, insights, and expertise. Let's bring our attention to today's episode. In addition to a person's current health and well-being through day-to-day direct care, hospitals are able to impact our collective health through their research in the health professional education programs. Northeast Ohio is a healthcare hub because of our hospitals having one of the strongest backgrounds in education and research. Education programs from our hospitals help provide the next generation of nurses, doctors, and health professionals that provide best-in-class care. Additionally, the research completed by hospital members generates generalizable knowledge on health, disease, and principles of health or illness to better combat and prevent adverse health outcomes. As the COVID-19 pandemic has caused an upheaval in our daily lives, it put a tremendous strain and responsibility on the healthcare industry as the first line of defense for our collective health in the fight against the virus. Today, as we progress in our series, we will discuss some of the specific programs that our region's hospitals provide around research and health professional education to help during quote unquote regular times and in the COVID-19 era. These vital programs offered by our region's hospitals have a wide-reaching impact in healthcare and have a goal of improving health and well-being for the residents of Northeast Ohio and beyond. I am so pleased to welcome a great group of expert panelists to today's session. Joining me are Dr. Grace McComsey, Vice President, Research and Associate Chief Scientific Officer from University Hospitals Health System. Robin Zelis, Cardiovascular Line Administrator at Southwest General Health Center. Robin is filling in for Cheryl O'Malley, who is unable to be with us today, as originally scheduled. We also have Dr. Dana Scheenberger, Research Administrator, Center for Clinical Research at the Cleveland Clinic. Thank you all for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing from each of you about the unique programs at each of your organizations. Before we begin, a quick reminder to the audience to please post your questions in the Q&A chat box, as we will have time to answer your audience questions. Due to a scheduling conflict, we would like the audience to post any questions for Dr. McComsey right away so she can address them right after her presentation, as she has to jump off our talk at the bottom of the hour. Let's begin with Dr. McComsey. You're here to talk with us today about the research efforts at university hospitals in the current space of the COVID-19 pandemic. You have the floor.
Hi, and thank you for the invite to speak. Hopefully everybody's doing well. If I could have my slides up. Perfect. Next slide. So within my job at the hospital, I direct the Clinical Research Center, what we call CRC, and the CRC at UH, as you know, is a health system of 18 hospitals plus. CRC is the infrastructure for research in all of our hospitals, and this is our mission: is really to do research, scientific innovation, but to improve patient care. We're not a lab. We enroll patients. We look at their data, and we want to improve the care that we give them. Next slide. I can tell you when COVID hit a year ago now, right, hit Ohio, and even before, actually, when we knew that it was coming toward us in the US, we started planning very quickly on how we are going to get studies as soon as possible to Northeast Ohio. At the same time, we were very concerned about what's going to happen with other research. Remember, if you have cancer, you can't wait for COVID to disappear. You need treatment. So we knew that we were in trouble in terms of the non-COVID studies, and we have to make sure to do whatever we can to keep these studies going, and we did. So we moved very quickly to electronic consenting. We had people on call 24/7 for any urgent processing of COVID studies, and research is in a way a business. And what I mean by that, it takes about 20 different tasks to start a clinical trial. So there are a lot of different people at CRC. We have about 250 staff. Each of them have a job to move research, to bring it to study activation to patients. So everybody worked as a team, all these 250 people. And we had a call schedule. We had emergency meeting even for our IRB, the Institutional Review Board, because there's no human study that starts without an IRB and a written consent. So we had them on emergency call, all physicians ready at any point to review a study. We had our research business office in constant contact with all sponsors, CROs. We knew there are some repurposed drugs that were going to hit clinical studies very soon. So we were in constant contact with them to basically let them know UH is ready, willing, and we can move very fast. And that panned out, as I'll show you in a sec. And we allowed, as I mentioned, we were worried about the non-COVID studies. So we allowed people to stay on study, even if they couldn't come to the hospital. We had home health visits. We had our own nurses go to people's homes to be able to do study visits. We shipped them study drugs. We allowed, virtual visits sometime. Basically, we did everything we could to keep people, retain them on study so they don't drop out. Next slide. And what happened is the first study we got, 2 studies we got at once for remdesivir. It was the first repurposed drug that was used in clinical trials. So we brought these 2 studies, and I want to show you as an example of what COVID did to research. Usually tasks that would take, pre-COVID, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, sometimes months to start, for example, to execute a clinical trial agreement, a contract. As you see, we received the material for the first study on a Sunday. 2 days later, 2.5 days later, we were ready to enroll patients. That process usually takes months and months and months. And this was a kind of, unusual time. So yes, we can't do that every day with every study. At UH, we have always about 3,000 studies, clinical research study at any time. So 3,000, we're not going to be able to do that for everyone. But to tell you how more efficient we could be when there is a deadly disease, it's coming, and you have to do everything because you may be next or your family may be next. So everything turned so efficiently and so fast. Next slide. So what I call silver lining, I mean, I think research actually, I don't want to say benefited, because COVID was awful, obviously. It led to a lot of death and a lot of people who remained sick. But it taught us a lot in research. It taught us, as I mentioned, we could be way more efficient, and we can make research easier for people. Now, if I approach people about clinical research, or even before COVID, very small proportion will be willing to go on a study. The reason is not only they're worried about study drugs. Sometimes studies have FDA approved treatments, but let's say we don't know if treatment A or B is better for a condition, even though they're both FDA approved. So the risk is small relatively, because both are approved. But people are unwilling usually to go on a clinical research because it is a pain. It's a pain to come to the hospital. It's a pain to park. It's a pain, sometimes the schedule is very intense for a study. And because we're so worried about compliance and making sure everything is done correctly, a lot of time this is backfiring on us in the research, that it's too rigid in a way. So during COVID, more people got exposed to research than any other time. People for the first time actually said, yeah, put me on a study, because they felt they had no other option. So research was seen in a disease where there's no standard of care as the only option available. That unfortunately actually happens in very few research where there's no treatment and you need the investigational agent, like in some cancer. But what I like, and I told my team, is we're working to continue to be as efficient as we were. Maybe not 2 days to do a study. I mean, that's unheard of. But efficient, and make things easier for patients. What that means is UH, as I mentioned, is 18 hospitals and continue to grow. If a patient lives next to hospital A, they don't have to come to CMC, to downtown, to see a research nurse. We can either send the nurse to them, or we can open up the studies at our community hospital. So it made UH in research work like a real system, like we do clinically. And that, to me, was actually a very big thing, big achievement for the center that happened during COVID. Next. So I mentioned, continuing the study. And one thing, the cancer Seidman is our cancer hospital. The cancer clinical trial unit never closed. In fact, they never went virtual. They continued to work as usual, even during the worst time during COVID. They were able not only to enroll patients like 2019, they did better. Actually, their numbers in 2020 were higher in enrollment than the year before during COVID, which is impressive. In fact, we had people from 10 states, as far as California, come to us because they had closed the clinical trial unit. And again, if you have brain cancer, you are not going to wait for COVID to go away, because you'll be dead anyway. So people came to Ohio, came to UH to be on a clinical study. And we were really proud that we were able to help these people during COVID time. Next. One other thing we did that ended up really helping research tremendously is to open up pretty quickly a COVID biorepository. So we have now, actually, we're up to almost 50,000 patients who are COVID positive within the UH system. And we have more than 18,000 biologic samples that we had collected on them. The reason for that is I didn't want people sitting in the hospital with COVID being approached by 10 different nurses or investigators saying, I want your blood, I want your urine, because COVID is cool. Everybody was so interested in helping to understand COVID. So we wanted to make it an institutional initiative. So patients are approached only once by one group. And we did it really well, and it helped a lot of our studies. We have now about 200 clinical research studies on COVID, and a lot of them use the biorepository. Next. The future. So next, we have our first mobile research unit in Ohio, and there are only a couple actually in the nation. This is gonna be what we call the bus. We call it a CRC bus. It's a huge bus that will be delivered to us in 2 weeks. It was delayed by COVID big time. It was supposed to be in much earlier. This bus is gonna be the CRC mobile unit. It has freezer, refrigerator, has a table, a bed, everything you need to do a research study. Remember, I talked about going to where patients are to make research more appealing and easier, and to retain people on studies so they don't drop out. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to community sites. Hopefully this is one. I think we need 3 at UH, but this is the first. Hopefully we'll be able to get 3 so we can deploy them in our community, different geographic areas. Next. This is the sketch of how it's gonna look. If you see it on the road, it's gonna have a UH and Rainbow and clinical research unit, a mobile unit. Next. So one thing that we're really focusing on, and it will take me a minute, is minority enrollment. This is the current state, the sad current state of clinical research. And this is not at UH, actually. This is in the US. Black Americans, 13% of the US population, only 4% of participants in clinical trials. Hispanics, no better, 16% of the US population, 3% clinical trials. So we obviously need to do something, because there may be a genetic predisposition to some safety concerns, to efficacy of different drugs. We cannot continue to only have white participants, and a lot of studies and disciplines, males only, because women are busy, family and stuff, so they don't go on the study. We have to do better with diversity in clinical research. Next. So because of that, UH took on actually several initiatives in 2020, in the midst of COVID. We built a clinical research community advisory board that has a diverse subset of the community to engage them, to help us with how do we get the education to different minorities group. We have an Autism Moss Center that serves a large number of African American. So I teamed up with them, and now they're doing COVID studies, both outpatient COVID treatment studies, as well as observational studies. We're hoping, again, the principle is to go where people are to make it easier for them rather than expect them to come to us. Next. So one thing I want to mention now, even NIH, their emphasis is like they moved on from acute COVID. Everything is about post-COVID. All you hear is long haulers, post-COVID. And the reality is, unfortunately, we're left with millions of people potentially not feeling good for months and months after COVID. So that's what we call the long haulers, or chronic COVID, or long COVID. Next. And this is, if some of you may have read that, Wall Street Journal had this, and it's, I'll let you read it. It's basically people feel awful. They feel like they're 90-year-old when they're 40 or 50, and it doesn't get better soon. Next slide. So persistent symptoms in COVID, the data are all over the place. There is no definition. There is no clear understanding of what percent. I can tell you it goes anywhere between 10, if you take 3 months after COVID, between 10 and 50% continue to have symptoms. sometimes symptoms are pretty bad. This is not just feeling a little fatigue. They can have bad symptoms. So we have not only a clinic at UH that deal with post-COVID, but now in research, we're putting together a large program. It's going to have more than 50 of our investigators to try to get to every aspect of post-COVID, to try to understand the immune system. Is it persistence of the virus? Try to understand every aspect of it. And we have a lot of attention actually now at UH to try to help understand post-COVID. Next. I apologize, my computer logged me off. Okay, so thank you. I know I took a couple more minutes. Thank you. I tried to speak very fast, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you so much. That was so informative, and I know the time goes by extremely fast, and we're trying to pack in lots of information. There was one question. You mentioned the Simon CTU Clinical Trials Unit did not halt accruals, but continue to serve Ohio patients as well as out-of-state patients. Can you share the number of patients served by Simon CTU during 2020? And if it's not the exact number, but like a percentage or a range?
Yeah, I mean, we enrolled more than before, and we had more studies than 2019. So we were on the actually growth in 2020. I don't know the exact number, but I know that at any time we have about 450 to 500 cancer studies active enrolling patients. So I know it's a huge number. I just don't know the exact. Sorry. I can get it. If anybody is interested, I can get them the exact number.
Well, thank you so much. Your time and expertise, all of the work that you are doing is so highly valued and appreciated, especially, when we think not just of Cuyahoga County, but all of the large service area that all of the hospitals impact. So thank you again. We're going to transition to Robin Zealous with Southwest General. You're here today to talk with us about Southwest efforts to educate and coordinate community response around the ever-evolving COVID situation. What can you tell us about it, and what have you guys been up to?
Okay, well, hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to meet everybody today and be in this forum. Thank you for including us. What I'm going to be talking about today is how we created a safety net for our communities through education and collaboration. Basically, as many people in Ohio know, the Governor DeWine, he started putting out executive orders in early March. And those executive orders were around things like quarantine, closing of public buildings, including schools, curfews, also, stay-at-home orders. And this created a lot of fear in our communities, a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety around the unknown because of COVID. The executive orders talked about the possibility or the thought transmission through respiratory and through droplet, but we weren't really sure even to the extent, what that meant. People just knew that it was highly contagious, and also that there's a very high death toll associated with the people that did contract the COVID virus. So there wasn't a lot known about the transmission. Also, wasn't a lot known about what group of people were susceptible to it, who had the highest susceptibility, and a lot of in the early days around the effective treatment. We've adapted to the COVID culture somewhat at this time, but it was really scary. So under the really outstanding leadership of Cheryl O'Malley, we developed what we referred to as a strike force. And the strike force was a multidisciplinary team from the hospital. Myself, I was a member, and the strike force was composed of administration, nursing, respiratory care services, infection control, pharmacy. They played a very big role. Some of our rehab staff. And the goal of the strike force was to work in collaboration to provide education to our extended care facilities in our community and our assisted living facilities. What we wanted to do was provide education. We wanted to learn from them. We wanted to share best practices so we could leverage our strengths around keeping our community safe. The two primary populations that we were focused on was our patient population, of course, but also our staff, because we needed to keep our staff healthy to anticipate a surge in population of COVID patients. The other people in our community we were concerned about were those who would be entering healthcare facilities like our EMS, our clergy, our transportation staff, et cetera. So we had at Southwest General, we have a history of working with our surrounding ECF and assisted living facilities for about 15 years. But in before COVID, it was primarily through a consortium meeting here at the hospital. When we developed the strike force, the goal was to go out to the facilities to actually spend time with those care providers and the administration of those facilities, to meet in person, to walk through the facilities, and again, basically to educate them. We learned a lot also, and to leverage our strengths in trying to reduce the transmission and trying to prepare for care for our patients. The hospital was developing a capacity, a surge plan, and also, working with the facilities regarding the patients going back and forth to, prevent a outbreak in their facilities and also in the hospital. So I have a list of the things that we worked on together, and I have some awesome handouts. I wasn't sure we could do slides today, but if anybody on the line is interested in some of those, I'd be so happy to provide those. But some of the things we talked about was, first and foremost, the screening of people coming in and out of the facilities, whether it was the hospital or the ECFs or the assisted living. What type of screening were we doing for anyone coming into the facility? We shared our forms to record our screening activities and our policies around screening. We shared a lot of policies around COVID in general. The other thing we did was we shared all of our infection control policies, and there were so many. Again, not knowing the exact transmission and how much PPE all of the facilities would need to be prepared with. We shared really cool things about the different cleaning products. What about the dwell times? When we went into the environment, into the facilities, we noted that some of the areas still had like curtains hanging because it was a home life environment. And so we made recommendations both at the facilities and here at the hospital that we wouldn't have that type of thing in the rooms so that we could keep them as clean as possible. We talked about the dwell times. Other infection control measures that were really important was the donning and doffing of employees going in and out of the patient rooms, minimizing the time in the patient rooms, observing the donning and doffing, helping assist with that. The cleaning of masks and personal protective equipment. The other things we talked about were things, for example, when care providers were coming in from their homes, to have a location where they could change into clean clothes or clean uniforms, clean scrubs to provide care. And then when they were leaving the facility, also going to a location where they could contain those clothes and their shoes before going to their home. Some of this seems so basic, but at the time, we really were thinking through, how can we reduce exposure? How can we preserve our PPE that we're not sure how much we're going to need, for how long we're going to need it? And also just, again, the anxiety of the unknown was preventing people from maybe thinking things that they would normally think about. So it was good to talk through these things and offer support. The other things we talked about was the availability of telemedicine monitoring, so that we could be in touch with our patients. And we set up a number of systems to be able to do that, so that we could be in touch with patients who are still healthy, patients under investigation, and also set up specific locations for patients who we knew were COVID positive. How were they going to be entering our facility and those other facilities? We set up very specific testing processes for patients that were inside the facilities that needed to come to the hospital, and also for patients who were returning from the hospital back to the facilities. There was a tremendous amount of policy development in that area. We worked with our EMS, as I mentioned. They were up to speed with all of these policy developments, and the facilities knew that. We also developed medication strategies, especially at the facilities where the residents were getting a tremendous amount of medications at different times, in order to limit the exposure time and interaction with the patients. And again, that PPE situation, what we did was we, with the pharmacists, worked with the facilities to make recommendations around bundling different types of medications, or eliminating medications that may not have really been mission critical. So we really tried to streamline the medication pass process. We also talked about a variety of oxygen therapies. A particular concern were those therapies that were aerosolized, and also proning patients for better aeration of the lungs. A lot of the staff at the facilities were not familiar with this practice, and so we worked to develop education along those lines and policies around those lines. The other thing we worked on was we were preparing staff for recognizing when patients were maybe getting into trouble and needed a higher level of care. So we developed policies and protocols along those lines. We made sure that we had policies to be aware of advanced directives, anything along those lines, for code status, what were care goals, particularly on our shared patients that were moving to and from our facilities. We recognized that, things were really changing at the facilities. And until we went inside, we didn't really realize to what extent. So before, when patients were able to congregate in common areas for meals, they could see their fellow patients in the facilities and interact with staff and have group activities. This was all not possible now. And so there was a tremendous amount of isolation for the patients in the facilities. And so we talked about some techniques and tactics to be in communication with them, like similar to telemedicine, but for more informal interactions with the residents. We also talked about, I think I already mentioned, the COVID testing for patients going to and from the facilities to the hospital, and also for employees. What about employees that were exposed, and how were we going to handle those back and forth? We developed, as I mentioned, rigorous capacity surge plans at both locations, and also rigorous staffing plans, backup plans for that. We also developed off-site locations where we stored extra equipment, both for pulmonary needs, monitoring needs, and also PPE. So that was how we worked together to collaborate, to provide education, to create this safety net. Again, I think through working together in this uncharted territory, we were able to share best practices, to leverage our strengths, and knowledge is power. And so I think people felt really supported, and in knowing that, we went to, all of these rigors to really try to support our patients, our staff, and anybody really in our community with concerns.
Thank you so much. And as you were talking, you illustrated so well of how to operate, not just with an unknown timeline, but also the uncertainty about resources and how to be flexible. And it's so impressive of how you took or made recommendations and looked at strategies, and then you were able to implement them so quickly or adjust as necessary, and have your staff across the board implement new practices and new behavior. Great job. I couldn't imagine all of the details and emails and meetings that went behind the scenes.
Well, thank you so much. And like I said, if anybody would like any of the policies or anything like that, I'm so happy to share them. We created a lot of documents with photographs and so forth, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, especially when you're working quickly on uncharted territory. So I thank you so much for your time, and I hope that everybody had learned through the process.
Absolutely. Thank you. And again, for the audience on the line, please feel free to drop your questions in that Q&A chat box, and then we will get to them pretty soon, momentarily.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Dr. Scheenberger, we're so glad that you are joining us today from the Center for Clinical Research at the Cleveland Clinic. You will be discussing biorepository, the biobank, and the clinic has established to provide the centralized location for all medical researchers to store test samples and collaborate on research. Can you please tell us about that?
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the opportunity to participate on the panel this afternoon. As Patricia mentioned, I'm a research administrator at Cleveland Clinic, and the work that I'm going to be sharing with you truly represents how we function at the clinic, and that is as a team of teams. So I will be sharing an enterprise effort that involves many, many subject matter experts, from clinicians to IT and data scientists. So please keep in mind, I am just one person really describing the work of many talented caregivers in our organization. So this year, 2021, marks our centennial. And although the size of Cleveland Clinic has certainly changed over the past 100 years, our commitment to the communities we serve has remained a top care priority. Our vision is to treat our neighbors like our family and our community as our home, with the goal of helping to create the healthiest communities for everyone. And we work toward this goal through different actions and programs geared at healing, hiring, and really investing in our future. In 2019, our community benefit, meaning the value of different programs and services that we provide to meet community needs, which include things like charity care, education, community health initiatives, medical research, among others, reached its highest level reported to date, which was about $1.16 billion. This afternoon, I will speak to just one piece of our community benefit strategy that I know best, and that is biomedical research. Cleveland Clinic's commitment to research and to innovation can be illustrated in many different ways. By the numbers, our Lerner Research Institute, which is led by our Chief Research and Academic Officer, Dr. Serpil Erzrum, supports nearly 200 labs, 2,000 researchers, which includes postdocs and graduate students, that's actually how I started my career at Cleveland Clinic. I joined the organization as a graduate student, we'll just say a few years ago. And last year alone, the Lerner Research Institute supported over 3,000 active research projects. So we certainly keep busy. Just to provide some examples of the research we're doing, we are currently working on a breast cancer vaccine. We're developing breath tests for detecting COVID-19 and other lung diseases, looking toward understanding the link between heart disease, diet, and intestinal bacteria, and using exercise to improve Parkinson's disease. So there's a lot of research going on. This is just naming a few of the studies that we're currently doing. But what I want to highlight this afternoon is a broader enterprise level research initiative for which I serve as the project manager. And this is our new state-of-the-art biorepository. This is an initiative that began several years ago under former CEO, Dr. Toby Cosgrove, and it continues to be supported by our new CEO, Tom Mihaljevic, who sees great promise in the biorepository really as a resource to expedite medical research. So throughout this presentation, I hope to answer the following 4 questions. First off, what is a biorepository? Why is it important for medical research? How is Cleveland Clinic uniquely poised to have this tremendous resource? And how will the Cleveland Clinic biorepository benefit our community? So we'll start at the beginning. What is a biorepository? A biorepository, also often referred to as a biobank, for good reason, operates very much like a bank. But instead of being a safe house for your money, a biobank or biorepository collects and stores samples like blood, urine, tissue, along with health information about the sample donor. So it's like an organic bank account. And really the ability to have these samples linked to a secure database of clinical and scientific information really reduces both the time and the resources that are required to recruit participants for individual studies, because the samples and corresponding medical information are available all in one place. So this allows caregivers to work at the top of their licensure and to quickly translate lab discoveries into better care of patients. Currently, there are individual departments at Cleveland Clinic that are biobanking on a very small scale for specific projects. They have independent freezers of blood and tissue samples with separate research systems to catalog the medical or scientific information that they may have about those samples. Disease-specific physician and research teams are certainly working close together to collect those samples, to store them, and then manually input donor medical data into these standalone systems. So doing this project by project is extremely inefficient, as each individual repository involves appropriate consent of the subject or their permission, secure storage of the samples, and codified procedures for sample and data retrieval to protect the subject's confidentiality. These small repositories exist all across our main campus, with really no central inventory system or a way to query and see what samples are available for utilization by new research projects. So the Cleveland Clinic biorepository will standardize sample collection, sample processing, and sample storage protocols so that we can increase scalability and efficiencies and really allow more scientific questions to be answered. So how exactly does it work? Well, the key to the Cleveland Clinic biorepository, which is led by our Chief Research Information Officer, Dr. Laura Jahai, is the integration of research specimen collection and clinical care. So when a patient has a test or a procedure at Cleveland Clinic, there's often excess blood, tissue, or other bodily fluids that are discarded after clinical results are completed. Patients have the opportunity to donate these excess specimens for storage in the biorepository. I always explain to patients that we're not asking for an additional blood draw or biopsy, but really just we want leftovers, right? If there's any excess sample available. These samples are then stored de-identified using a unique code that replaces the patient's name. And that code is linked to medical data like demographics, comorbidities, different lab values, social determinants of health, et cetera. And all of this data is housed in a secure and customized system for superior analytic and informatics capabilities. Now, throughout our strategic planning process, Cleveland Clinic leadership decided to sharply focus our resources on our areas of scientific expertise and actually outsource storage of the physical samples that are collected. So we selected an industry partner, Brooks Life Sciences, which is a worldwide leader in the management of research specimens. So together with Cleveland Clinic, Brooks is building a cryo storage facility that will house over 400 freezers and liquid nitrogen tanks and is right adjacent to our main campus. It's actually directly across the street from our Learner Research Building. Construction of this facility is almost complete and is anticipated to open this summer, so we're very excited about that. So why is this biorepository important for medical research? Well, all biorepositories certainly have the potential to expedite new diagnoses, to further precision medicine and really advance medical knowledge that could ultimately change practice management guidelines and really transform healthcare. The opportunities to achieve medical breakthroughs are really countless, such as revealing disease patterns, biomarkers for new diagnostic indicators, to individual treatment options based on genetic and specific medical, and even identifying new pathways that can be targeted to slow down disease progression. So by undertaking targeted analyses of the data in these biorepositories, new insights like which patients would respond best to certain treatments or who is at most at risk for developing various diseases can help us to further precision medicine, essentially using information from all to care for everyone. Precision medicine or personalized medicine allows our physicians to not just treat cancer, but to treat your cancer. We know that medicine is not one size fits all, and so the biorepository will allow us to better understand how to treat each patient as an individual. In addition, research outcomes will afford the opportunity to revise clinical guidelines and potentially disseminate new protocols to medical caregivers around the world. Investigations could yield new discoveries and even some commercialized technologies that could revolutionize care for today's patients, as well as for patients in the future. So how is Cleveland Clinic uniquely poised to have a large-scale biorepository? Well, the uniqueness of this comprehensive project is really the significant size, complexity, and diversity of our patient base, as well as our ability to link samples to multiple years of electronic medical record data to analyze the course of diseases and treatments. The Cleveland Clinic Biorepository will include patients from our Ohio and Florida facilities, as well as patients in Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, and London in the future. Now, at our main campus alone, we do about 220,000 procedures and over 800,000 blood draws every year. And the largest department biobank currently collects about 2,000 samples in a year. So this really highlights not only a gap in the utilization of our patient population, but also a huge gap in scientific discovery. So Cleveland Clinic has a unique opportunity to not only streamline research efficiencies by unifying the availability of biological samples, but also to develop a sophisticated data system linking those samples to medical record data and vital health information. As one of the first to pioneer the electronic medical record over 2 decades ago, Cleveland Clinic houses millions of records, which can be quickly queried and categorized. And again, the scope and complexity of patients that we see at Cleveland Clinic really provides an unprecedented volume of information, allowing us to serve as a national leader in healthcare. Never before have individual samples been linked to over 2 decades of searchable electronic data. So how will the Cleveland Clinic Biorepository benefit our community? There are certainly a number of ways. First of all patients can participate in the biorepository, which increases access to research for our patients and community members. This resource will help us to attract talent to our organization and to our community, including top physicians and top scientists. We'll recruit more graduate students and postdocs, providing us with an opportunity to educate future physicians and future scientists. It will also allow us to be more competitive in our grant applications and potentially bring in more NIH funds to support medical research. We have also dedicated space in the biorepository building itself to serve as a research access center, which is really aimed at empowering our diverse community to participate in research studies. We are currently working with folks internally, as well as with members of our community and local government leaders to fully operationalize this space. But the idea is that it will serve as an access point for our community, a place where they can go to learn about the value of participating in research, as well as current research opportunities. And they will also be able to donate samples to the biorepository in this space if they wish. Building on some of the established initiatives within our community, we intend to further cultivate connections with the Fairfax neighborhood, where the biorepository building is located, and improve health outcomes for residents. This can only be achieved by building trust with our community. For example, there's a lot of mistrust of research in the African American community, and for good reason. Historical misconduct, like the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis, was ethically unjustified, and we acknowledge the reservations that our African American community feels about participating in research. So we are actively listening to their needs, understanding them, and really providing education about the importance of biospecimens to medical research for all. We also want to understand the community's specific health issues so we can continue to address persistent health disparities. As part of this effort to connect and bring vibrancy to the Fairfax community, our Art and Design Institute, in collaboration with Karamu House, commissioned an artist to engage residents in really a social practice-based process, resulting in the production of a public-facing art project that's going to be displayed right outside the biorepository building. Jacoby Satterwhite, American artist from New York City, was chosen to produce this public art piece. And his multimedia work is going to utilize both the inspirations and contributions from members of the Fairfax community, will symbolize utopia and what utopia means to our community. So we're all really excited to see the final product. With that, I will stop there. I want to thank the Center for Health Affairs, as well as the other presenters, for sharing their mission of research and community benefit. Really, with everybody working together toward a common goal, that's how incredible things happen. And I am both humbled and inspired by everything that we've heard today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I realized, when we do the planning and setup and we say, 12 to 13 minutes, that seems like a long time, but there's such a wealth of information. Thank you for walking us through the biorepository. And again, it's such a nice demonstration of how to be responsive and innovation, employ innovation and all of these great things. We do have a couple of questions that I want to get to. So one being, aside from the affirmation projects, are there additional research efforts in the region that would be beneficial for population health experts to observe or to help inform existing programs? So whoever wants to take a stab at that.
I know at least at Cleveland Clinic, we are doing a lot of research into our region, and that's one of our strategic goals is to, increase research and programming at our regional health facilities and regional hospitals. Also with the CTSC kind of collaborating with other local institutions to, work together to push research and programming across the community. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of initiatives going on for that purpose.
Thank you. Robin, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
Just that there's a lot of research that had to happen really quickly. For example, the use of convalescent plasma to treat our COVID patients. I know that there are different clinical trials for different treatment approaches. Some formulary medications and some new medications and treatment approaches, different types of oxygen therapy, And it was so, I mean, I've been so inspired by all of the speakers. I suddenly have so many ideas to do so many more things. But our first speaker talked about the chronic or long-term effects of COVID. And so there is ongoing research how we are going to manage both the acute and the chronic phase. And how are we going to do that most effectively? So I think, and in terms of population health, and I'm sure the clinic in UH, we have all of our patients on a telemedicine product for extended period of time, whether they're treat and release from the ER or whether they were inpatients and go home. There's a lot of research along those lines, and how long will patients, depending on certain criteria, require that type of monitoring. So that gets to the population health continuum model.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Another question that we have, how can health professionals access information about current research and educational programs conducted within the hospital systems?
That's a great question. I would say from Cleveland Clinic, there's a lot of information on our website. We've got a link to all the different trials that are going on. You can search by different disease types and see what's going on, as well as our educational programs. And I can maybe provide those to the audience here afterwards for your further exploration. Thank you.
Thank you. And Robin?
Thank you so much. Everything that we would be doing currently is also listed on our hospital website. And if there are other questions, we do have a 24-hour question line. It's 1-877-SWG-BEAT. And anybody who's calling in, we will connect you with the right person to answer any of your questions.
Perfect. And this is going to be our last question as we wrap up. For Robin, as we've seen, the COVID landscape is still ever changing. For example, the CDC just issued new guidance on gatherings for vaccine recipients this week. How have the relationships you've built in the community during the start of the pandemic proven resourceful in facilitating new information right away?
Right. So thank you for that question. It's so multifaceted. I'll try to be quick. So, for example, with regard to our facilities and the creation of a community safety net, what we have been doing is, I know that Cheryl is on a conference call with them weekly. We're in very close communication with them. Any policy updates that we have here at the hospital are distributed broadly to the facilities and to our EMS. Any of the governmental agencies that we work with, for example, our city fire and police, that type of thing. So we are, I talked about the strike force going out initially, but we have an ongoing, what I would call strike force, to continually provide policy changes and updates, information on our website about the vaccine program here. And also internally, we have a group of nurse practitioners who follow our patients at all of the facilities, so that when they're inpatients, they know they're here, they meet with them and the family, they communicate with the facility post-discharge about the status, they're aware of when they come back into us. And also, of course, we work very closely with our EMS and our ER for any incoming patients. And again, as our first physician spoke this morning, I mean, we are doing this very rigorously, in addition to continuing all the other good things we're doing for patients that they also need. And so that's the challenge, but we're up to it. And I'm just so privileged to be a part of this today. And I'm so inspired by the forum and by the speakers. And I thank you for that. Anything else along these lines?
Thank you. You know, I want to close up. We might be out of time and it's going to cut off at any moment. So thank you to everyone who presented. You have all illustrated exceptionally well the many different hospital research and education programs that our region hospitals provide to help solve health issues here in Northeast Ohio and beyond. Thank you for our audience for being with us today. And this concludes our series on hospital community benefits. Please stay
Thank you so
tuned for
much.
other upcoming Bright Talk presentations, and please view our on-demand talks about how other hospitals and community leaders have responded to the pandemic. Thank you. I believe we're out of time. Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.